Billionaire mogul reveals his true queen at a gala. The grand ballroom of the Phoenix Tower shimmered, a galaxy of crystal and gold suspended over the most powerful people in Atlanta's property market. Champagne flutes chimed like tiny bells, a constant, careless music. At a table near the front, Sade sipped her drink. Her red-bottomed heels crossed elegantly. She was the senior vice president of acquisitions, and tonight her firm was celebrating the sale of this very building to a mysterious, silent buyer. She felt a smug satisfaction. She was at the center of the universe. The CEO, a man named Mr. Thompson, stepped to the podium. The room hushed. Tonight, he began, his voice echoing slightly, we celebrate a new chapter for the Phoenix Tower. For months, we have worked with a buyer whose vision and resources are simply staggering. A man who has quietly, diligently built an empire from the ground up. Sade smiled. She loved this kind of talk. Power, vision, empire. These were the words she lived by. He has remained anonymous until this very moment, Thompson continued, a dramatic flair in his voice. But he is here with us tonight. It is my profound honor to introduce the new owner of this building, and indeed, our entire portfolio. The founder of Adjei Holdings. Sade leaned forward, a flicker of professional curiosity in her eyes. Who was this mystery king? Mr. Kwame Adjei. The name hit the air and shattered the smug calm on Sade's face. Her wine glass slipped from her fingers, hitting the plush carpet with a dull, unnoticed thud. The blood drained from her face, leaving behind a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. Her perfectly painted mouth fell open. Across the room, a man rose from a quiet table in the back. A man she knew. A man she had discarded. A man she had called decorative history. It was Kwame, and he was walking towards the stage. If you want to see how a simple plate of food can build an empire and humble the proud, then like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that feed the soul. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Kwame Adjei, at 44, was a man carved from Ghanaian earth and polished by American ambition. He stood 6'3", with the presence that filled the room before his body even crossed the threshold. His skin was the color of rich, dark soil after nourishing rain, smooth and deep. He wore custom-tailored suits of charcoal and navy that cost more than most cars, but he wore them with the ease of a man who had been born into them, not a man who had fought tooth and nail for the right to do so. His net worth was a staggering $1.2 billion, a fortress of assets built brick by silent brick in the world of commercial real estate. But his eyes, deep-set and thoughtful, held a history that no balance sheet could ever quantify. They held the memory of dust-caked feet in tamale, the scent of shea butter from his mother's hands, and the gnawing, hollow ache of loneliness that had been his constant companion since he'd arrived in Atlanta 2 decades prior, with nothing but a tattered suitcase and a fire in his belly. He lived in a sprawling penthouse in Buckhead overlooking the city, a glass palace of solitude. He had 1,000 associates. He had 100 employees. He had 0 friends. His ex-wife, Sade, had been one of the first people he met in this new, overwhelming country. She was beautiful, sharp, and possessed an ambition that mirrored his own, or so he thought. Her beauty was a curated masterpiece. Her hair was not her own, a cascade of expensive Brazilian weave that fell perfectly over the shoulders of her Chanel jackets. Her skin was flawless, maintained by $500 creams. Her nails were always immaculate, a weaponized shade of crimson. She was drawn to the fire in Kwame's eyes, to the grand visions he painted of the towers he would one day build. She loved the idea of his success, but she had no patience for the process. For years, as Kwame struggled, taking odd jobs, studying architectural plans at the library until his eyes burned, she grew colder. Her initial admiration curdled into contempt. His dreams, once a source of fascination, became an annoyance. She saw his refusal to cut corners, his insistence on integrity, not as a virtue, but as a weakness, a flaw in the code of his ambition. Ambition doesn't pay the rent, Kwame. She had told him one rainy Tuesday, standing in the doorway of their cramped apartment, her arms crossed over a Dior blouse. You are a beautiful dream with empty pockets, and I am a woman who lives in the real world. That was the day she left him. It wasn't just a separation, it was an amputation. She took with her the last of his confidence, leaving him with the echoing silence of her dismissal and the tangible reality of a now unpayable rent. He was 28 years old, and he had never felt more alone. He was adrift in a foreign city, the dream he'd held so tightly now feeling like a fistful of smoke. That night, shattered and hungry, he walked. He had no destination. He just walked, letting the damp Atlanta air fill his lungs. He walked from their once shared apartment in Midtown all the way down to College Park, the city's glittering skyline shrinking behind him. He had exactly $7 in his pocket. Not enough for a real meal, barely enough for a bus ticket back. The hunger was a physical pain, a hollow clawing in his stomach that mirrored the emptiness in his heart. It was past midnight. The streets were quiet, save for the hum of a lone street lamp. And then a smell reached him. It was a scent from a life he thought he'd left behind. A scent from his childhood in Tamale. It was the smell of waki. Rich, savory, a perfume of rice and beans cooked with sorghum leaves, accompanied by the sharp, spicy promise of shito. He followed the scent like a man hypnotized, his feet leading him to a small, unassuming food stall parked under a flickering streetlight. A simple cart, a few plastic chairs, and a single incandescent bulb that cast a warm, golden glow. Behind the counter stood a woman. She was older, perhaps in her late 60s, and her face was a beautiful map of a life well lived. Her skin was the color of midnight silk, and her natural hair, a crown of silver and black coils, was tied back with a simple cloth. She wore no makeup. Her hands, stirring a large pot from which the glorious steam arose, were working hands, strong, capable, and gentle. A warmth radiated from her that had nothing to do with the steam of the food. It was a constitutional warmth, a light that shone from within. Kwame just stood there, a few feet away, inhaling the aroma. It smelled like home. It smelled like hope. He didn't have enough money, and the shame of that fact kept him rooted to the spot. The woman looked up, her eyes kind and perceptive. She saw him, not just a tall, well-built man, but the exhaustion in his shoulders, the despair in his posture. She saw the hunger that went deeper than his stomach. She smiled, a gentle, unassuming thing. Her voice, when she spoke, was like warm honey. "My son," she said, her Ghanaian accent a balm on his raw nerves. "You look like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders. Sit. A full belly makes the load lighter." It wasn't a sales pitch. It was an invitation, an unconditional offering of care. Kwame was so taken aback by the simple, profound kindness that he couldn't speak. He just nodded, his throat tight with an emotion he couldn't name. He sank into one of the plastic chairs, and the woman, without asking for a single dollar, began to fill a plate, a generous scoop of the dark, fragrant waki, a spoonful of gari, a ladle of rich, dark stew, a hard-boiled egg, perfectly sliced, and a dollop of fiery, homemade shito on the side. She placed the plate in front of him. "Eat," she said simply. Her name, he would learn, was Isi. That plate of food was more than sustenance. It was grace. It was dignity. It was the first act of unconditional kindness he had received in a very long time. As he ate, tears he didn't know he was holding back began to fall silently onto the plate. He didn't just taste the food, he tasted humanity. He tasted a lifeline. Essie said nothing. She just went back to her pot, giving him the space to mend himself, one spoonful at a time. This became his ritual. Every night, after long days of searching for work, of studying, of rebuilding his shattered confidence, Kwame would find his way back to AC's stall. And every night, a plate of waki would be waiting for him. He would try to offer his few dollars, but she would always wave them away. "Your strength is your currency for now, my son," she would say. "Invest it in yourself. When you are rich, you can buy my whole stall," she would laugh, a warm, rumbling sound that made the lonely Atlanta night feel less cold. Their conversation started simply. She would ask about his day. He would tell her about a failed job interview or a small success in a drafting class he was taking at a community college. She, in turn, would tell him stories of her life in Cape Coast, of the fishing boats coming in at dawn, of the proverbs her grandmother taught her. Do not call the forest that shelters you a jungle, she told him one night as he spoke bitterly of his struggles in the city. This place, it is hard, but it is also giving you a place to grow strong roots. You cannot see the height of the tree when you are staring at the dirt. Her wisdom was like water on dry land. It was simple, profound, and always delivered with a gentle certainty. She never pitied him. She saw his potential, not as the glittering prize Sade had desired, but as a seed that simply needed time, soil, and care. She was the soil. Her food was the care. This went on not for a week or a month. It went on for 2 years. For 2 solid years, as he fed Kwame. He became a fixture at her stall, a silent, grateful presence in the late hours. He would help her pack up, wipe down the counters, carry her heavy pots to her small van. They developed a deep, unspoken bond, the kind forged in shared silence and mutual respect. He was the son she never had. She was the mother he desperately missed. During this time, Kwame's life began to change. He got a low-level job at a small construction firm, then a better one as a junior project manager. He was saving every penny, his mind a whirlwind of plans and calculations. He was fueled by Isi's waki and her unwavering belief in him. One night, he arrived at the stall a little earlier than usual. Essie was not at the counter. He saw her sitting in one of the plastic chairs under the dim light, a small, worn ledger book open on her lap. She was hunched over, her brow furrowed in concentration as she counted a small pile of coins and crumpled bills. There wasn't much there. He watched as she took a few bills from that small pile and tucked them into a separate envelope marked rent. The pile that remained was heartbreakingly small. He suddenly understood. The food she gave him wasn't from her excess. It wasn't from her profits. She was feeding him from her own substance, from her savings, from the money she needed for her own life. For 2 years, she had been shouldering his hunger, taking it from her own plate. The cost of her generosity wasn't just the price of rice and beans. It was a piece of her own security, a piece of her own future, given freely, night after night. The realization struck him with the force of a physical blow. The air left his lungs. He saw the full scale of her sacrifice, the sheer, staggering weight of her kindness. This elderly woman, who worked through the cold nights to make a humble living, had been his silent investor, his most loyal benefactor, funding his dream with her own livelihood. He stepped back into the shadows, his heart a raw, aching thing in his chest. His eyes burned, not with sorrow, but with the profound, overwhelming gratitude that felt like pain. He leaned against a brick wall, the rough surface biting into his back, and he slid to the ground. He buried his face in his hands, and for the first time since his mother had passed away, Kwame Adjei wept. He wept for his own past foolishness, for his pride, for the cruelty of the world that Sade represented, and for the impossible, miraculous goodness of the woman sitting just a few feet away, counting her coins. He was not just crying, he was breaking open. The last of the bitterness, the last of the despair was washing out of him, leaving behind a core of pure, unshakable resolve. He would repay her. He wouldn't just buy her stall. He would give her a kingdom. While Kwame was being rebuilt by kindness, Sade was busy cementing her own world with cruelty. She had moved on and up, climbing the corporate ladder with a ruthless efficiency. She moved in circles where names were currency and net worth was a measure of a person's soul. Kwame, to her, was a footnote, a forgotten chapter she preferred to mock rather than remember. Their paths crossed 3 times during Kwame's 2 years in the wilderness. Each encounter was a fresh cut, a new layer of humiliation. The first time was about 6 months after she had left. She was driving her new Mercedes through Midtown when she saw him walking, his shoulders slumped in a cheap coat. She didn't stop. She didn't wave. She simply picked up her phone and called a mutual acquaintance. You'll never guess who I just saw, she said, her voice dripping with condescending pity. Kwame, still wandering the streets, looking like a lost puppy. Some dreams just stay dreams, I suppose. The words got back to Kwame within a day. They stung, a reminder of her verdict on his life. The second encounter was a year later. Kwame had started his job at the construction firm and was attending a small community networking event, hoping to make contacts. He was wearing his only suit, a size too big, bought from a thrift store. Suddenly, he heard her laugh, a sharp, polished sound he would never forget. Sade was there, on the arm of a well-known Atlanta developer, a man twice her age with a paunch and a platinum watch. She saw Kwame, and her eyes flickered with something between surprise and amusement. The developer, noticing her gaze, asked who Kwame was. Sade turned, a brilliant false smile plastered on her face. "Richard, darling, this is Kwame," she said, her tone light and dismissive. "He used to have potential." She let the word hang in the air, a poisoned dart. She didn't offer a handshake. She didn't ask how he was. She just delivered her judgment and turned away, leaving Kwame standing alone in a sea of strangers, the word potential echoing in his ears like an epitaph. The public humiliation was a cold fire in his gut, but he thought of Issy's calm face and swallowed the anger. The final encounter was the most brutal. It happened just a few months before his fortunes were about to turn. He was doing a site survey for his company, a job that required him to measure the facade of a major office building in Buckhead, the Phoenix Tower. As he was taking notes on a clipboard, a group of executives walked out of the gleaming lobby. Sade was among them. She was in her element, confident, powerful, laughing with her colleagues. She didn't even notice him at first. He was just part of the scenery, a man in a hard hat and a safety vest. But then one of her colleagues, a younger woman, pointed. "Sade, wasn't that your ex-husband?" Sade followed her gaze. Her eyes landed on Kwame, and a look of pure, unadulterated contempt crossed her face. She didn't lower her voice. She didn't care who heard. "Oh, Kwame," she said with a theatrical sigh of boredom. "He's just a ghost of Buckhead. All talk, no assets. He's just decorative history now." The phrase, so specific and so cruel, hit Kwame harder than any insult before it. Decorative history. Something to be looked at, remembered with a faint sense of nostalgia, but ultimately utterly useless, powerless, a relic. Her colleagues tittered, and the group swept past him, their expensive perfumes mingling with the exhaust fumes of the city. Kwame stood frozen on the sidewalk, the clipboard heavy in his hand. He looked up at the towering glass and steel of the Phoenix Tower. He looked at the name etched in granite above the door. And in that moment, the final piece of his plan clicked into place. The fire in his belly, banked and nurtured by Issy's kindness, roared to life. He wasn't a ghost. He was a foundation, and he was about to buy the ground she was standing on. From that day forward, Kwame moved with a singular, ferocious focus. He left the construction firm and, using his meager savings and a small business loan secured with a brilliant, meticulously researched proposal, he started Adjei Holdings. He started small. He bought a dilapidated duplex in East Point, renovated it himself with a small crew, and sold it for a modest profit. He poured that profit into a 4-unit building, then an 8-unit. He worked 18-hour days. He lived and breathed property law, zoning codes, and market analysis. He had an uncanny ability to see value where others saw decay. He saw the potential in forgotten neighborhoods, the promise in crumbling facades. While other developers were chasing the glittering towers of Midtown, Kwame was quietly buying up entire blocks in Southwest Atlanta, in Decatur, in areas poised for explosive growth. He never moved into a fancy office. He ran his burgeoning empire from a small rented room, his desk a salvaged door laid across 2 filing cabinets. Every dollar of profit was reinvested. He lived as frugally as he had when he was broke, his only indulgence the nightly plate of waki from Issy's stall. Issy watched his transformation with a quiet, knowing pride. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, but also the triumphant light that was beginning to dawn there. He started paying her for his meals, pressing crisp $50 bills into her hand that she tried to refuse, but he was insistent. This is not a payment, Mama Essie, he told her, using the affectionate title he had adopted. This is a return on your investment. Within 5 years, Adjei Holdings was no longer a small operation. It was a silent giant. Kwame had acquired a massive portfolio of residential and commercial properties, all purchased discreetly through a series of shell companies to keep his name out of the headlines. He was a myth in the real estate world, a ghost buyer known only for his aggressive, brilliant acquisitions. No one knew who was behind the curtain. Sade, in her high-rise office at the Phoenix Tower, would sometimes complain about this mysterious new player in the market who was snatching up properties her firm was targeting. She spoke of Adjei Holdings with a mixture of irritation and professional respect, never once dreaming who the architect of her frustration was. Finally, the day came. Kwame's crowning achievement. Through a complex and masterful negotiation, Adjei Holdings acquired not just the Phoenix Tower, but the entire real estate firm that managed it, Sade's firm. He was now effectively her boss, her boss's boss. He was the owner of the very building where she had pronounced him decorative history. He decided to reveal himself at the company's annual gala, the very event celebrating the sale. He arranged everything with the outgoing CEO, Mr. Thompson, who was the only one who knew his identity. He bought 2 tickets to the event, one for himself and one for the queen, who had funded his empire with Waki and love. He went to Essie's stall the week before the gala. She was serving a customer, her movements as practiced and graceful as ever. Mama Essie, he said, his voice soft, next Saturday, I need you to take the night off. She looked at him, surprised. Take the night off? Kwame, my customers will be hungry. They will survive for one night, he smiled. I have an event I want you to attend with me, as my guest of honor. She was hesitant, unused to such things. An event? Me? Kwame, look at me. I am a food seller. What would I do at a fancy party? He reached into a bag he was carrying and pulled out a long, elegant box. You will be the most beautiful woman there, he said. He opened the box. Inside was a gown of shimmering gold, kente cloth, custom made by the best Ghanaian seamstress in Atlanta. It was a dress fit for royalty. Essie gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. Kwame, she whispered, unable to say more. You sheltered me when I was in the jungle, Mama Essie, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Now it's my turn to show you the forest. And so the stage was set. The night of the gala arrived. The ballroom at the Phoenix Tower buzzed with anticipation. Sade was in her element, air kissing, networking, her laughter echoing over the clinking of glasses. She felt untouchable, secure in her position at the apex of her world. She had no idea that her world was about to be turned upside down. When Mr. Thompson called his name, Kwame rose and walked towards the stage. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. People who knew him from his early days, people who had heard Sade's dismissive stories, stared in disbelief. Sade's shock was the most profound. Her face was a canvas of horror. The ghost of Buckhead was not only present, but he was the king. The decorative history was now the owner of the future. Kwame reached the podium and stood there for a moment, letting the reality of his presence sink in. He looked powerful, calm, and utterly in control. He wore a custom Brioni suit, and his eyes, once clouded with despair, were clear and bright. He looked directly at Sade, whose face had gone from chalk white to a blotchy, mortified red. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, Kwame began, his voice calm and steady, amplified by the microphone. It filled every corner of the vast room. Good evening, everyone. Some of you may know me. Some of you may have heard stories about me. His eyes lingered on Sade for a beat too long. A nervous cough rippled through the crowd. I want to tell you a story, he continued. It's a story about value. Here, in this room, we measure value in square footage, in market caps, in profit margins. I once believed in that too, but I learned the true meaning of value on a cold street corner in College Park. He told them everything. He spoke of his arrival in America, full of dreams. He spoke of his struggles, of his poverty, of his hunger. He didn't mention Sade by name, but he didn't have to. He told the story of a person who left him because his pockets were empty. Then his voice softened. I was at my lowest point. I had nothing. I was invisible. A ghost, you might say. He paused. I remember standing outside this very building years ago and being told that I was nothing more than decorative history. Gas rippled through the ballroom. Sade looked as if she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Her colleagues, who had been there that day, stared at her, their expressions a mixture of shock and dawning disgust. But the thing about history, Kwame went on, his voice regaining its strength, is that it is the foundation upon which the future is built. And my foundation was built not with money, but with kindness. It was built by a woman who saw a hungry young man and offered him a plate of food with no expectation of anything in return. He painted a picture for them with his words. He described the smell of the waki, the warmth of the steam on a cold night, the simple dignity of a plastic chair and a clean plate. He told them how this woman had fed him every single night for 2 years, not from her profits, but from her own savings. She invested in a human being when he had no market value. She saw a future that no one else could see. The empire I built, it started on her stove. Every brick I laid was made possible by every grain of rice she served me. He then turned his gaze to the back of the room. The true guest of honor is not me, he declared. It is her. Mama Adjei, will you please join me on stage? A path cleared in the crowd, and walking down that path was Adjei. She wore the magnificent golden kente gown. Her silver and black hair was styled in an elegant upsweep. She wore no makeup, and she needed none. Her inner light, the same warmth that had drawn Kwame to her stall years ago, now illuminated the entire ballroom. She was breathtaking. She was royalty. She walked with a quiet grace, her eyes fixed on Kwame. He came down from the stage to meet her, took her hand, and led her up the steps as the entire room, stunned into silence, watched. He led her to the podium. This is Adjei, Kwame said, his voice thick with love and reverence. She is the founder of my success. She is the chairwoman of my board. She is my family. She is the true queen of this empire. He then handed the microphone to her. Adjei looked out at the sea of wealthy, powerful faces, her expression calm and serene. She was not intimidated. She simply smiled her gentle smile. Good evening, she said, her voice soft but clear. Kwame was hungry. I had food. It is not complicated. The profound simplicity of her words landed with more force than any corporate jargon ever could. My grandmother in Cape Coast always told me, do not call the forest that shelters you a jungle. This city has sheltered us all. We must remember to be the forest for each other. She looked at Kwame, her eyes shining with pride. I am very proud of my son. Then Kwame spoke again. As the new owner of this building, my first executive decision is this. The prime retail space on the ground floor, the one with the best street access, will be undergoing a renovation. It will be the new home of Atlanta's finest Ghanaian restaurant. It will be called Adjei's Place. The ballroom erupted, not with polite corporate applause, but with the roar of genuine, heartfelt ovation. People were on their feet, their faces alight with emotion. They weren't just clapping for a business deal. They were clapping for a story of hope, of kindness, of justice. They were clapping for the quiet food vendor who had become a queen. Sade stood frozen amidst the standing ovation, utterly alone. The applause was like a physical assault. Every clap was a judgment. Her carefully constructed world of status and brands had been demolished by a plate of waki. She saw her colleagues looking at her, not with pity, but with contempt. Her career, she knew in that instant, was over. But it was more than that. Her entire philosophy of life had been proven bankrupt. She stumbled out of the ballroom, unseen and irrelevant. 3 months passed. Adjei's Place was the talk of Atlanta. It was a stunning restaurant designed by the city's top architects with warm wood, beautiful Ghanaian art, and an open kitchen where customers could see the magic happen. But the heart of it was the same. Adjei, now with the full staff, still insisted on overseeing every pot of waki, ensuring it was made with the same love and care. It was always booked, a destination for everyone from city mayors to regular people craving a taste of home. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, a woman walked in, huddled under an umbrella. She was dressed simply in clothes that were neat but not expensive. Her face was bare of makeup, and she looked tired, humbled. It was Sade. She had lost her job, her fiancé, her place in the glittering society she so adored. She had spent months in a painful self-imposed exile, replaying her life, her choices, her cruelty. She had heard about the restaurant and felt a pull she couldn't explain. She needed to see it. She needed to understand. She sat at a small table in the corner, her menu trembling in her hands. A waitress came to take her order, but AC, seeing her from the kitchen, walked out herself. She approached the table, her expression gentle, without a trace of triumph or judgment. Sade looked up, and her eyes met Issy's. Tears welled instantly. I just came to, she started, her voice breaking. She couldn't finish. The shame was too great. Essie simply looked at her, the way she had looked at Kwame all those years ago. She saw the pain. She saw the hunger that went deeper than the stomach. She placed a gentle hand on Sade's shoulder. "My daughter," Essie said, her voice like warm honey. "You look like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders. Sit. A full belly makes the load lighter." The exact same words. The sacred callback. The unconditional invitation. Sade broke. A sob escaped her, a raw, ragged sound of a soul cracking open. She buried her face in her hands and wept, right there in the middle of the beautiful restaurant. Issy pulled up a chair and sat with her, patting her back gently, letting her pour out the poison of her pride. She had come expecting judgment, but she had been met with grace. The closing image of our story is not of Kwame in his penthouse, nor of Sade in her ruin. It is of Essie, a few minutes later, placing a warm plate of wake, stew, and shito in front of a weeping Sade. She is doing what she has always done, feeding the hungry, mending the broken, and building an empire of kindness, one plate at a time. Every tale has a lesson, and our channel never forgets. Do not call the forest that shelters you a jungle. That forest may be the only thing that remembers you are human when you have forgotten it yourself. For more stories that remind us of what truly matters, be sure to like and subscribe.